Hi everyone, this is Matthew Kenslow, author to Juggling the Issues Living with Asperger's Syndrome, which is making a difference in people's lives around the world. This video was inspired by Helicopters and More, and he asked me a question about how it was like growing up with autism and making friends. Was it easy for me to make friends? Was it hard for me to make friends? The answer of which is not easy to explain. But let me make a disclaimer real quick. Once you meet one person with autism doesn't mean that you met everybody with autism. For me, it was hard to spend time with friends, but for others it may be easy for both, and for others it may be hard for both and such. And that's the lot of living with Asperger's syndrome. I have made a lot of friends, like hundreds of them by high school graduation, but how much did I spend time outside of school with them? How much did I actually hang out with them? That's the question, because the answer is not a whole lot. With autism, there is a block of nervousness, as they call it. It's like this magnetic, invisible, repulsive block that's between me and other people. And that's the best I could explain it. When I was in elementary school, it was easier to make friends and spend time with friends, but when I got older, it was a bit hard, because once you get to middle school, it's kind of a different life than elementary school. In third grade, when I was the new kid at Newport Heights Elementary School, I remember the first day, and my teacher made sure that I was introduced to not only the new class, but his former class from the year prior. And I have made a lot of friends in third grade, and I spent time with a lot of them, and it kind of continued all the way to grade 6. However, there were times when I was just fed up, because it's like I could say I have a lot of friends, but do I always spend time with them? Sometimes I did spend time. Other times I was in the dugout feeling very lonely and depressed. I remember doing something one time because I was that sad, and I am not really comfortable sharing it right now publicly, but let's just say that there has been some times where I expressed how sad I was, and there were times where I wanted to disappear. A couple of times where I just ran away to some other part on campus, wondering if anyone would even notice. And no, even though a lot of my classmates were friends and such, they didn't necessarily take me seriously all the time. And yeah, I had a lot of friends, a lot of support, and it was easy to make friends, relatively speaking, for me. But at the same time, it's hard to socialize with them. So it's not necessarily that it's difficult to keep friends, but it was difficult for me to spend time with them outside of a regular school day. When I got to instant intermediate school, that's when I found out what outings were. And an older friend of mine and I made goals to try and go on outings with our peers as much as possible. And I'm like, I'll try, and I did try. And one time I asked a person if he and his twin brother wanted to go to the movies on Saturday. I had no idea what we were going to watch, and I called Saturday morning. The father picked up, never heard of me, so it's like, okay. And other times I called other people. I either got an answering machine, or they said that they were busy, they had like clarinet practice, or they had something else to do that day, which of course I understand. So I just continued to spend most of my time alone from my peers, people who are my age. And by the time I got to high school, specifically the latter half of high school in 11th grade, I confessed to one of my friends since 3rd grade about how I was feeling. I felt like I was being invasively intrusive if I just go up and ask a person if I could spend time with them and such. And he's like, no, don't think about that. So long story short, we hung out a couple of times. He showed me the hangout spot with all of our peers over at Newport Harbor High School, and I've spent the next year and a quarter going over there, and same thing, I just stand by the wall and I wait for people to come to me, and sometimes they did. Same thing with the high school youth group. I just always stood by the wall and waited for people to come to me. Now, earlier, I mean, I would play like the ping pong game and everything in youth, but whenever there's like parties in youth class at the Presbyterian church or whatnot, I would always just wait for people to come to me, and my eyes are spinning one way and my head's spinning the other way and my body's spinning the other way, and it's just hard to explain. And I could be in those situations barely, but the whole point in all of this is I was just too shy to take the step forward and say hi to my friends myself. And sometimes I did, and other times I didn't. And sometimes whether I'm at school or youth group or anywhere and people come to me, it's like a hi and bye. Sometimes it's like, hi, how was your day, or how was your weekend and such. But I've never had the the long face-to-face conversation that I always wanted this entire time. So I remember being at Newport Harbor High School at that hangout spot by Sims Hall where all my peers were, and I was just so frustrated, tied in knots, fed up of everything, that I can't put that step forward. And at the same time, graduation is coming soon, and ready or not, I was about to graduate high school. Academically, I felt mostly ready, but socially, I didn't feel ready at all, because I still wanted the opportunity to spend time with people all these years and such, and it was hard to, and I did, don't get me wrong, but not as much as other people did. So let me tell you a quick story, something that happened in 11th grade. I believe I was in 11th grade, and I believe it was spring break, the last week-long break of the academic year, and I had the directory in my hand, and then I thought about some friends to call, and again, everything I'm going to say is the 100% truth. I rehearsed it in my mind, what I was going to ask, how I would possibly ask, hey, out of the blue, do you want to spend time together today or sometime this week and such? And then it took a minute to deliberate, do I still want to call this person? And then I pressed each number of the phone number slowly, and then I took a few minutes really deliberating, do I really want to call this person? And then it took like a few minutes to get up the nerve to press the call button so that I could call. And I did that thing, I forget, maybe like a half dozen times that day with like a half dozen friends, and the nerves were killing me as I got closer and closer and closer of pressing that call button. And within those couple of hours of chaos, I would estimate, because it was like nonstop for a couple of hours, just that cycle, like think about a person and then dial the phone number and then think some more and contemplate and rehearse and everything. I usually got some answering machines, and sometimes I actually got a couple of parents, and that was pretty much it. I didn't spend time with anybody that week, nor have I at all, ever. I will say that in 12th grade, I did spend time with a friend just a few times. He lived over at Balboa. He was a good friend, and we also hung out during lunch. We would go to 7-Eleven and back, but again, nothing else, even though I so desperately wanted to have that social friendship, that camaraderie and such. And again, I had the camaraderie, but I didn't spend time with anybody outside of school. Now, about the trees I referenced over at Newport Harbor High School, the reason I brought that up is because when I was a senior, thought about those two trees as a metaphor, and I was thinking those two trees were probably very young when I was young. They were probably alive when I was young in early elementary school, and all those times, when I was growing, when I was realizing who are friends, how to be a friend and such, and realizing that I wasn't always treated as a friend because of autism, and I was thinking about those trees being grown up and such, and I was kind of a bit mad that that was how my life was and everything. I'm not sure how this is going to sound, and I'm not saying I came up with a perfect metaphor or whatnot, but this was all in my head, and I never really told anybody until I was writing book 3 of my trilogy, when I was telling this story through my character. But I might as well tell this story right now, that I thought about those trees kind of representing my childhood growing up, and just being very nervous and very mistreated, as well as sad, depressed, lonely and such, that I got so fed up that I really wanted to take my hand and just try and knock those trees to the ground. And as time went on and I started to get a bit more mad, being there at Newport Harbor High School during nutrition and feeling the same thing that I felt before, I actually got closer to those trees, and at least once, maybe a couple of times, I did try and find out how much pressure it was going to take to knock those trees down. And I literally tried. I know how strange that sounds, but to an autistic brain with archetypes and metaphors and creative writing and such, that was what was in my mind at the time. And I thought that if it was torn down, if for like 1 in a million I was successful, that would just represent as an archetype my troubles through either discrimination or nervousness would be torn down, and I could start living. So that is the metaphor of those two trees, and that is what I put in book 3 of my trilogy that is going to be published sometime in the future, I'm not sure when. And I endeavored all the way up until I graduated high school. And I would ask people throughout 11th and 12th grade, like, what do they like to do for fun, or where do you go during lunch or nutrition and such, or what do you do here and there, and they just gave me like simple answers and didn't take a hint, and they didn't invite me to join them or anything. I'm like, that's as comfortable as I am. I just cannot take that extra step forward saying, well, could I tag along? Another reason why things were hard for me is because I hardly had any interest in what most of my friends were saying or wanted to do. I mean, I was more traditional, just I like walks, I like conversations, I like board games and such. And number one, I didn't want to be bored to death, and two, I didn't want to add strain to my friends, having them put themselves out just to help me out. I think the closest that I ever got was a little basketball game with a couple of friends, and we were already up until that morning, and then I open a Facebook Messenger. Well, they didn't have Messenger back then, but Facebook Messages, and he said, oh, sorry, I forgot it was my sister's birthday, I have to take a rain check. And there was no rain check, and that was basically it. And again, once I got to Orange Coast College, and much later after that, Vanguard University, I did make a lot more friends. And again, it was more colloquial, it was more conversation. Rarely did I spend time with classmates outside, but that was basically because we were in a club, or we were helping each other in physics or whatever. And so at this point, I once again summarize that it's not necessarily hard for me to make friends, but they were superficial friendships. I've been talking to a pastor recently about this, because he was preaching about social media and such, and that kind of seems to be the trend of the entire church, because the youth group was talking about social media, and since I'm a youth minister intern for junior high, I got to voice about social media from a first-hand perspective. I happen to be perhaps the only person at the church who is big on social media. I don't say big arrogantly or whatever. I'm just saying I do understand it. I am like on the inside, and I could warn about the dangers of social media, because again, I get it. And again, I made that video about social media and autistic friendships. In fact, I was telling that to the pastor last night, in fact, and that's when he used the adjective superficial and such, and I think that's what it was. I mean, it was just like a high and by superficial friendship and no depth or anything, and overall it just felt like an empty space of lonesomeness and sadness that was there in my heart for 20 years and such. And that's kind of why I'm voicing everything out now, because I don't want anyone else to live through this. I want to encourage people who have autism to just go for it and take the step forward. And I also want to encourage the people who do not have autism to recognize us, accept us, and then advocate for us, be a friend to us. And I would advise them, the neurotypical, to put the step forward and ask people who have autism or some disability that makes them nervous to socialize if they want to hang out with them. Because in my experience, I was just standing there out in the periphery and just waiting for people to come to me and such. And if I would have gotten out back in high school, like I am now, an author, YouTuber and such, I would have voiced these things back then. I probably couldn't say it as I'm saying it now, but I would hope that through that, maybe they would just recognize, because I'm just too nervous to bring this forward to them. But again, I didn't not throw out hints to my peers. When I was in 11th grade at the school, and I mentioned this in my book, I was taking Spanish 1, and I would put on the board, like we would go on the board and write out sentences, and during this unit we were learning about these phrases. And I might be a little bit rusty in my Spanish, even though Spanish was easy, but I put Nunca paso al rato con mis amigos. Yo quiero pasar al rato con mis amigos un día. Again, Spanish 1 and 2 were my favorite classes, but it's literally been a decade. But to translate, I said, I never spend time with my friends, but I want to spend time with my friends one day. And a couple of people, sympathized with that, but didn't really take the hint and such. They were still friends, and in class we would talk to each other. In school we would say hi, but there's hardly been anything that happened outside the gates of a school. And it probably should come to no surprise, but I have had dreams where my classmates appeared and we hung out, or we were about to hang out, and sometimes dreams mess with me, and it's like we were about to hang out and there was a delay and I was waiting and waiting and waiting, and other times we did hang out, but as soon as I woke up, like almost immediately after, it's just that same forlorn sadness feeling. I mean, look up the definition of forlorn. I also talk about that in my book, and I also talk about this in my book too, but sometime like starting in middle school onward, whenever I would watch a movie or a show that had friendship in there, like friendship with peers, like middle school age, high school age, because I was a middle schooler and I was watching these movies, I would watch that at night and I would wake up with this bizarre, forlorn sadness, depression, complete forlorn, which means abandonment, basically. I just felt that feeling inside. And it was the most depressing thing I ever feel and such, or it is the most depressing thing I ever feel because of the current situation that I have on hand. But I'm trying to stop it at a personal level, and I'm also trying to prevent other people from having to feel these things by educating people, particularly ignorant people, about us and to accept us for who we are. And again, and I posted a YouTube video about this, I go around the neighborhood and I see a lot of discrimination. I feel a lot of discrimination and such on me alone wherever I go. And in that video I do have some body cam evidence of discrimination. If I'm experiencing this, then a lot of other people are experiencing this too. And that's why I'm choosing to go around the world like I am, so that other people do not have to go through this. And let me tell you, it should also come to no surprise that whenever I think of like what could have happened or what can happen, and it just doesn't, the same amount of forlorn, lonesome, left out feelings that's strong in my heart persist. Like whenever I think back on my childhood and thought, if A, some people didn't discriminate against me, or B, my friends would have recognized and asked themselves if I wanted to spend time with them, then I kind of think what could have happened. I probably might have felt more fulfilled. I probably wouldn't have a lot of hurt or like an empty space in my heart. So here's something that I'm willing to admit. When I was growing up, and every time that I saw one of my friends, just like a few friends on their bikes and such, for the rest of the day it's hard to explain, but I always thought I was with them. I mean, I knew I wasn't with them. I always imagined and longed to be with them and continue on the conversations. It's kind of a bit like a left out feeling and just lonesomeness feelings, and that's kind of been my life. And the bad thing that I did is I held it in, and that's why I make that analogy about don't bottle things up inside, that science demo analogy that I do. It's not just bottling things up about feeling sad and left out, but also bottling things up if you felt bullied or discriminated. Like don't hold those feelings inside. And there's been things that I held in for like 15-20 years, and I'm just now beginning to elucidate some of those things that I face. And once again, I'll go on record to admit that social media is like kind of like a superficial friendship. I love sharing, I love supporting other people through social media, but it's not the same as like real face-to-face friendships and interactions. I also want to re-emphasize that there are just a few things that I'm just not comfortable of divulging on the record yet, but this is perhaps all that I'm willing to divulge in this video. And again, I hope this video helps. And if this seems a bit deja vu to you, then I recommend you to watch my video that I recently posted about autistic friendships and social media. And I kind of talk about similar things in that video. And not only that, but I have several other videos in my autism awareness playlist. So I hope that encourages everybody. I hope that answers questions. And please let me know if you have any other questions. I'd be happy to answer as well. Have a nice day and stay safe out there.